If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Central Valley Talk. I'm your host. The name of my show is Ray John's American Patriot. Well, I was going to discuss a lot of other things today, but in lieu of what happened in Santa Fe, Texas, I'd like to talk about that, and I'd like for you to talk about that too. I hope that you'll call in. I hope we get some callers on this. Let's talk about this. Perhaps there's some way we can have a small healing and maybe pass it on to the people that are directly affected by this awful, awful thing that we all inherited when we awakened this morning. Now, I don't know if you're aware of it, but since the beginning of the year, I think this is the 118th day of this year, there has been, including that today's tragedy, 8 school shootings. Now you can do the math. Well, you really don't have to because I've already did it for you. That's about 14.75 shootings. I mean, every 14.75 days. Every 15 days there's a shooting. Now, that to me is just, we can't tolerate that. There's got to be something done. I'm sure America, I know I am, a little bit angry this morning because this continues to happen. It does. And I did some statistics and found out that since the year 2000, the past 18 years, there have been over 200 school shootings in this country. More than 200 lives lost of students and more than 400 wounded. Now, I found out that the 35 foreign countries that have the most school violence, and I won't name them, I've got them all right here. There's 35 of them, and they total in population 3.8 billion. We have about 3.8 million in this country, about 1/10 of the combined populations of those 35 countries. And yet, we are responsible for over 60% of the school tragedies in this country. We have an epidemic in this country. And hopefully, someone out there, I mean, I can't help but think when a young person dies, I mean, could this have been may have been another great athlete, maybe been a great entertainer, and more importantly, much more importantly, maybe this child would have grown up to eradicate disease. I can't help but think that. Well, they're my American patriots this week. The children wounded and killed in this very unnecessary tragedy. Gary?
How you doing, Ray?
Good, buddy.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Terrible thing, huh?
Yeah, and it gets down to values. I remember a time when kids brought guns to school.
Hey, you and I talked about this. You've got it, I went to Chowchilla High School, and I can remember pulling in the parking lot one day, and this kid getting out, and he says, "Hey, man, check my new 22 out." And he took it, we're in class, and I mean, guys are, holding it and passing it around.
Well, it's part of that political correctness that is ruining this country. Now, at one time, I'd go to school, that's where I went and got my bullets.
Oh, my goodness.
At school.
Mm-hmm.
That's where all the kids went and got their bullets at that time. Mm-hmm. And kids had guns in their racks on their pickups.
There wasn't a pickup that didn't have a gun rack and a gun in that rack.
So once people get it through their head that guns have nothing at all to do with it, zero. Positive proof of that is because at one time there would be guns and no violence, and now with a gun-free era, there's violence.
If anything, this awful tragedies and these tragedies that continue to happen is a great favorable point toward the Second Amendment.
Well, yeah, and the Second Amendment is is there for a reason. But the thing about it, once people get it through their head that guns have nothing at all to do with it, values do have 100% to do with it. Mm-hmm. I don't care how many guns or whatever. That has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a hard concept for somebody that's been brainwashed into thinking guns has something to do with it.
Oh, yes. Right,
what has something to do with it is the lack of values being taught in the schools by the liberal left-wing communists.
Well,
it's part of the overthrow. The reason why they want to take away your guns from the Second Amendment is because then they won't get shot at when they do take you over.
Good point, Gary.
Well, I mean, there's no more to it.
Yeah.
It's a value deal until the value system changes.
And the value system has changed a lot.
So all this rhetoric about guns is ridiculous. Right. Let's talk about the values and how to change the values.
I've always said anyway, and we all say this. I mean, how ridiculous is this? Yeah, take all the guns away from all the people. The bad guys are still going to get the guns.
Well, they're not only going to get the guns, but they're going to, the real bad guys, which are those interested in overthrowing the United States, which is happening and has been demonstrated to be happening right now. When we look at the DOJ and we look at the FBI and we look at the CIA, that was infiltrated by people whose interest is to overthrow the United States government as we think it's supposed to be. You know, but going back to way back then. So when they come up with the guns, and I in fact I turn it all off because it has nothing to do with it. Now, if you want to talk about how do we change the values, that's something that I.
Oh,
think
and you're absolutely right. I mean, you know,
I'm
we all
not
know.
interested in debating the gun issue at all. I'm not interested in that one iota. I'm not interested in debating the Second Amendment because the Second Amendment's there; it's going to be there.
You're doggone right it is.
I am interested in maybe changing the values.
Well, you know, I couldn't help it today. They were talking about solutions for the this, and of course, if anyone had one, it would be done. And there's got to be a solution for our children being shot in schools and they came up with several different things. They had one of the things they came up with was a complete closed down campus. Close these campuses down. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the gentleman who was wounded, I can't think of his name, I apologize for that. He's a congressman during that softball thing. He talked at length today when this happened, and I caught bits and part of it because I was working. But he said there is $62 billion set aside, thanks to President Trump, for the school systems. Why not use that money? And I know it may not sound like much when you think of all the school systems in this country, but there's something that can be done security-wise. I don't know. I heard different things today. One was actually, which is, I know it's awful, actually searching each kid as they come in. And someone said, well, you know, we really can't afford financially to do that. My thoughts are you can't afford not to do it. Whatever it takes to save one life, I'm 150% for it.
Well, I think that's a Band-Aid, strictly a Band-Aid, but until the public is taught the values that are necessary, and that is a mind control. And basically what has happened in especially the last 40 years, has been a takeover of the people's minds by the communist left, and they've been successful using the media as propaganda.
Well, they certainly use it now more than ever.
Yeah, and so my point being, I don't care what you do. I mean, obviously you search whatever you want to do, but you got to start instilling a moral value system. And when you're taking out of the most malleable mind as a youth, when you start taking the American flag down out of the classroom, start taking away the American flag.
That's what got to me.
Start taking God out of the courtroom, taking God out of the conversation. And when you stop emphasizing morality, then
good point, Gary.
You're going to
very good point.
You got to change the value. You got to put that back into it. You got to have responsibility and accountability. And this is what's important about a libtard or a liberal.
I love that name.
I know, but gosh, I guess some people. Well, there again, it's not PC, and people are just so upset about anything.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God! I mean, you talk about hurting feelings. United States has to have the most hurt feelings in the world the way they go about things.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. When Hillary Clinton lost this election, and I've talked about this on my show a year ago, and they had to take in kittens and give those college girls, those co-eds, hot chocolate in the middle of the night because they were so devastated because Hillary Clinton had lost.
I mean, come on now, you know.
What does that tell you about this country?
Cowboy
what happened?
up, you know, cowboy
thank
up,
you,
you know.
thank you, thank you.
And
What's happened? This country has, thanks
There's a
God,
big-
we got Donald Trump coming back.
Well-
Are raising a bunch of. There's a bunch of babies out there.
Well, there's a reason
You know?
they're called snowflakes.
Yeah.
You know.
Good point.
And so that part has to change.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to change it is ignore it. Ignore these people. I mean, I don't get into conversation with these kind of people anymore at all. I just have that one thing that I've told you before. I just say, what's Trump doing?
Well, it's amazing. People ask me all the time, say, I like your shirt. And I always tell everybody the same thing. I've got 19 of them. I wear one every day. I said, sometimes I wear 2 a day. I'll change into another. Well, when I go to the gym, I always wear 2 a day. That's Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And then other days, I'll go to the gym.
Right.
Change, put on another one, and then before the night's over, if I go out that night, I'll have another one on. But anyway, the remark is always, don't people just say bad things to you? I said, no. Nobody says any bad. I get 95% good comments.
Well, Ray, you know what you are is an advertiser of patriotism and what we're talking about with the moral values and so forth. And people have to respect that. And I think that you are respected because of it, as opposed to the other way around.
Thank you.
In fact, I know you are.
Thank you.
And so I think that is obviously I think it's tremendously admirable of you to do that. But you also are silently, maybe perhaps in the minds of others, you're creating a certain mindset in that maybe they start questioning themselves in their line of thinking. You see, and it may not be vocalized at that point.
Yeah.
But, that isn't the point.
No,
so I think that the value system has to be changed back to things that...
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah. We got to get away with participation trophies.
Oh, my
Well,
goodness.
you take these colleges now, all these degrees, basically, by and large, are nothing more participation degrees. I mean, all I got to do is sit out there at Fresno State for 4 years and I get a degree. Well, which I can't do anything with, probably not, other than teach somebody, teach school, which is teaching them, again, the propaganda I just got jammed with. And that's the end of it. Which brings me to the next thing I wanted to mention was today Trump talked about prison reform.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that. I only saw part of that, but
I did too.
I want to know, too. So go ahead, Gary.
But, that's kind of... That's a start of a value change, and I've had.
What did he say?
I've had some association with that. Basically, what he was doing is and Van Jones. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was there. Of course, him and Trump has been like this, but they're getting along. And it's on this prison reform, and they didn't go into specifics as to what they're actually going to be doing. It was more of a PR type prison reform, invite these people, this and that. Anyway, here's my thoughts on that, and I've had some association with that kind of a thing. And it's rather simple if you really want to think about it. Okay, let's just use statistics. There's roughly 660,000 people in prison right now. Okay. Out of that 660,000, only 20% are violent.
Okay.
So there's 80% that are in there because of primarily a drug-related infraction.
But nonviolent.
And there's also, embezzlers and stealers and all that. Right?
White collar.
Okay, now let's change their values. How do we do that? You can't change someone's value unless you change what they think about themselves.
Very true.
Right? So if I don't think of myself as anything other than a shoplifter, I guess I got to just change that value to where that is no longer a payout. Okay? And one of the things that I think is a huge waste, and it's very detrimental, is what we need to do is take these prisons, separate the violent from the nonviolent,
You got a workforce there, for gosh sakes. You have I just thought of that, a workforce.
So
you said 80%?
80%.
That's a huge workforce.
Okay, now, I've interacted with some of these people, and I know what their issue is when they do get out, and it's awful. I mean, in fact, you're tempted, and many of them do. You go right back in, okay? But what you do there, Ray, is you think of it like this. You make these 80% in a prison that is, essence, a vocational school. And you learn the things like mechanic, plumbing,
welding,
construction, go on and on, fabrication and so forth. But you also, white collar type jobs also, computer technology. You learn how to program computers, if that's where your destiny would be, and you learn these skills and you become educated in that type of field, including personal finance, which would probably be the number one, investments, accounting, and these kind of things. Okay, now these schools are not taught by teachers. I don't trust the teachers, not because they're bad people, because they're indoctrinated.
Well, sure they are.
So these people come out of the workforce. So as an example, let's say you're a welder for some company somewhere. Your employer partners with the government to where you then spend X amount of time for a semester as an instructor.
Beautiful.
And I want people to teach these people that walk the walk and not talk the walk. Big difference.
I'm sure there is.
Big difference. So now you're in there and you're taught before you go there. Let's say you're a welder. I said, well, I'm not a teacher. Well, yes, you are. Especially after we get through and show you how you do the curriculum. So now you get paid just like you're working.
Yeah.
But you go over and spend a semester or something like that to teach these prisoners who are interested in that particular field, whether it's electrician or what, and now you teach them, but you're being paid by the employer, and the employer is benefiting
subsidized
because of a government partnership. Okay?
Absolutely.
Now you're learning from people that actually walk the walk.
Yeah.
Think about that. Now when you come out of there, you have a skill of some kind, and it could be a white-collar skill. Let's say that you want to, see, I've always wanted to be an accountant, or that interests me, or finance, or whatever, okay? But you also are learning personal finances. It is taught the way the military does, not the way the colleges do.
It's brilliant, Gary.
Okay, now,
I like this.
How does the military do it? The military takes a guy walking down the sidewalk and barely chew gum or walk at the same time and goes through this military thing, but he goes to a school, doesn't he?
Sure he does.
Now, I've been to those schools, and you learn in those schools. The military has taught a way to teach people to where they actually learn something, and they learn a skill.
Yeah.
How many people that go to the military come out of there with a specific skill? It may be a cook, it may be whatever, right? A number of things.
Yeah, sure.
That's all required within the military. Well, the military is a country in itself, requiring all the things that any country does. Driving a road grader, I mean, electrical work. But you are assigned based on how you test out to a school somewhere. Well, that's the same thing. The only difference is it's in a prison because you're a prisoner. But you're learning the same techniques in the same way, but you're being taught the same way the military teach, not the same way the colleges teach.
Jeez.
And you're taught by those people, and there's always that respect that walks the walk.
It just amazes me that we've got this tremendous workforce that's there. They're nonviolent. That's 80% of 660,000.
Well, they got caught, whatever it was. They made a mistake, and they know that. But now they have to live with that to the point to where their only choice is back to prison again. No, that's what's wrong with it.
You could even subsidize this in a sense so you got 80% of 660,000. You could rent 100,000 of those out in the private sector.
That's what you would do.
Yeah. Make an absolute
and then what happens? You could even have whatever it is that they're performing in there. That could be like a business in itself.
Sure,
in other words, if I'm needing whatever it is I'm needing, what do? I call out to the prison and say, hey, do you got? I'm needing this put together or this put together,
Sure.
this and that. Do you have somebody out there? Oh yeah, we got a guy. Well, he makes it for
Sure.
me. Let's say I need this trailer made, or it could be a number of things, or I need this forms made up. He knows how to do that. He's taught that. So now when he comes out of prison and has done his time, I look at that time thing like this. You got to look at it like that. When you go to prison and you've been assigned a number of years, I don't care if it's 1 to 20, and that's the number of years that you've been assigned to prison. Now, regardless, when you get out of prison, you paid your time. You don't need to be having it go on the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
You paid your time, you see. So let's say you're a 10-year prisoner and you get out. You get out now with all the skills that you learned while you was in prison. You've performed a utility while you was in prison because you were performing in your field that you specialized in and were taught, to where now you were actually in a productive way producing something, a product, whether it be physical or mental. You could be accountant or something that now is a utility for people of use. You've already done that.
Yeah.
And now what does that make you feel? It makes you feel a self-worth that is a high self-worth of yourself.
There's the key right there. There's
Of course
one of the
it
keys.
is. Because I talk to these prisoners that are about to get out. You know, they're kind of in a okay. These poor guys go out and try to get a job. They're not employable.
No.
That's a waste of time.
They have no skills, plus the fact they have a record. So,
And that's it.
Gary, we're going to take a little break
Yeah.
here, and we'll be back, ladies and gentlemen, in two and two.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, where there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say American, where at least I know I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this.
Okay, I'm back. I was going to save this until the end, but I think I'll say it now. That Central Valley Talk, our thoughts go out to all of those affected by this awful tragedy in this terrible times. And we pray for you. We're with you. We're thinking about you. Gary?
That's good, Ray. And so unnecessary. But I think I think it has a result of, I look back when I went to school and I look at the values that people had then compared to the values they have now.
Oh, there is no comparison.
It's
None.
It's day and night. So back to what would change that, one of the changes, of course, is changing the way we value our prisoners. In that sense that we don't just put them away and get out of our mind, but we make them a useful citizen.
Well, you've got a great point, Gary, because there's so many of them, as you say.
Well, look at this. Right now we actually have people looking for. We have jobs that aren't being filled. So there's 500,000.
And with Trump,
people.
that's going to continue to grow. That's a good point.
Well, it's going to continue to grow, so it's going to become more critical. What are we doing bringing these people from foreign countries that are illiterate and is not their best into our country and welcoming them when we got the same kind of people, if you will, sitting there in our prison. Why not take those people that are already here, that are American citizens,
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
and
Absolutely.
make them and change them
Absolutely.
into a value rather than a negative. And guess what happens to them? I've been there. I've had these guys come up to me, and I'll never forget this one guy. It was a Hispanic guy, and he says, "Hey," he says, "I want to talk to you." You know, this was lunch, and so anyway, he
Was he working for you, Gary? Or?
No, he was in prison. We were in a prison.
Oh, you were in. Okay.
Okay, and this guy, he comes over there and sits down with me, and he says, "I want to ask you something." He says, "Do you think I can make it on the outside?" And I looked at him, you know, and I said, "Well, let me ask you." I says, "What are you in here for?" He says, "I was a drug dealer." He said, I have a 9th grade education, and as far as formal education." And he said, "I quit school, and I became a drug dealer down in L.A. And then I finally got caught, and this is why I'm in here." So I asked him, I says, "I'm going to ask you," I says, "how good a drug dealer were you?" I said, "Did you make a lot of money?" He said, "I made a lot of money." I said, "Did you have an organization?" "Yeah, I had an organization." And I said, "Well, you were successful then as a drug dealer, obviously, until you got caught." He said, "I'm very successful." I said, "So it tells me that you have the skill to how to run a business." And that's one of the toughest businesses there is.
Sure.
And if you was able to survive in the drug world environment and be a success at it, why can't you do the same on the outside?
And of course he can, and there's a lot of them there that are like that.
Exactly,
I mean,
and he's
same
wanting
energy,
out. He's wanting out of that life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, well, at least you get to sleep at night.
Well,
you know,
and he
for crying
said
out
like
loud.
this, he says, I said, "Hell, I know so. I know you'd be a success. Because if you could be a success in that business you were in, I guarantee you could be a success on the outside."
Sure he could.
And so I think about that guy a lot because I'm thinking, well, that is the issue. There's so many more just like him, but need the opportunity.
Boy, you talk about change, a major change in this country and an attitude.
Right.
I said a long time ago, which is just an insanity thing to say, I admit it myself. Can you imagine how far this country would go if we could all get on the same page?
Well, think about that.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, Ray, if you look at it this way, let's get back to that prison deal. Okay, yes, these people made mistakes, their environment, name whatever it is. Okay, are they bad people? Of course. Did they pay their price? They are paying their price.
Yes.
And when they get out, they have paid the time. You know, so let's not sit there and put a boot around their neck and hold them down. But we can't expect something from nothing. So
Yeah, there you go.
we've got to take these people and give them the opportunity and use the military type program. I mean, line for line. Do not use the educational system curriculum type approach.
That's
at
already
all.
that's already failed. hasn't
That's
it?
failed miserably. That's
Yeah.
why some of these guys are in prison.
Yeah.
Because it's failed. Okay? So you change the value. You do it like the military. Military takes you in there. You don't know anything. Next thing you know, you're out there driving a tank, or you're flying an airplane. You know, or you're working on a Caterpillar mechanic, or you're driving a truck. Now, did you do any of that before the military?
No.
Did you know anything about it? Of course not. But you do now, and you learn it in a quick way. Did you spend 4 years to learn it? No. You go to a school in 6 weeks. You're driving a truck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Much more efficient, taught by people that actually do it, that walk the walk. And this
I'll
is
tell
what
you,
you
Gary,
do.
it's ideal. It really is.
And now you take these people, they now enter into the workforce. They now have a whole different set of values of themselves, and they're being reinforced by their families and friends because nobody really is proud to have a jailbird as a relative, right? So now he's feeling good. He doesn't have to have that kind of a stigma. Now, did he spend that once? Yes. But what else have we always may have done once? Weren't you a killer in World War II shooting people? Yes, that doesn't make you a killer today. So you did that once, but you're not today.
Yeah.
And so that prisoner is the same thing. I'm not talking about the violent, psychological, screw up people. But that's easy to discern which is which. I mean, they do it anyway.
Yeah.
So my idea of reform is that. And that kind of reform, when he gets out,
That kind of reform will work.
well,
for
when
one
he
thing.
gets out of prison, okay, what is his value compared to the guy that just got his diploma at Fresno State that doesn't know anything about anything and now is in
Oh,
the workforce?
there's no comparison.
This guy is, who's going to be more valuable to the employer? This guy.
9 times out of 10, this guy that's just getting out of prison with all these skills is going to have a job when he walks already, before he even gets out.
Because it's a partnership.
Yeah.
And in fact, he will have a job before he gets out because there is employers that are looking for people to fill the vacancy.
That's what I'm saying. When you said there was a shortage,
Yeah.
I thought, yeah.
Okay, let's take your business. And you need an employee. Wouldn't you prefer to have an employee who has been skilled in what
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
doing?
Whether it be painting or
Yeah.
plumbing or
Right.
just electrical stuff, which we
Exactly.
have.
Okay.
I've got an expert for that, actually. But,
Yeah, but I understand.
But I know, but
you see what
I
the
know
point
what
I'm
you're
making.
saying,
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so then you're going to want to go to a guy that's had experience.
Yeah.
It's just like a car mechanic. I'd like to go to a guy that, by God, has worked on a car before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who I want to hire to work on my car.
Yeah.
And this is what you do with this prison. You do it just like the military does when they
Gary, it
train
makes
somebody
so much
off
sense,
the street.
buddy. It does. It makes so much sense.
Yeah. So the military takes people literally off the street.
We have a ton of people that don't do anything. I mean, they're incarcerated. They're
Right.
just there.
Right.
You know, why not, like you said, why not take the non-violent sector of those people and work them right back into the private sector? You know.
You work them into the private sector because there's a demand for them in the by the private sector, as opposed to looking at them as something. Oh my God!
Oh.
Yeah. You know, yeah, he's got some strikes against him,
Who doesn't?
but who doesn't?
Who doesn't? In some form or
And
another.
the important thing is this: it's what you're doing now, not what you did. Okay, think about this a little bit, because people think about, well, how about the future? You know, well, he might do this and he this and this. I said, why don't we do this? Let's look at the now, and here's how you do that. Because yesterday is a canceled check. It's gone.
Yeah.
Okay, tomorrow is an illusion, a promissory note.
Nothing
Right now
factual.
is cash. Let's spend it wisely.
Uh-huh.
So this
That
guy
matters.
represents cash right now. And so now he has an opportunity to prove himself, not just to somebody else, but to himself. But he has the skills to do it. with.
Did Trump touch on this?
I didn't.
Yeah.
It was right before it came, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
Well, I was
I
the
just
same.
looked through it. I didn't see any specifics.
I'm going to pull it up tonight.
Yeah,
Because
I didn't see any. And it may be vocational in the prisons, like we're talking about right now.
It's just to
It
me
makes
that
it makes sense. Okay, because then I want to ask you this: if this doesn't make sense, then give me the alternative. What does make sense?
There isn't one, as far as I know.
Okay, then why wouldn't his program
Yeah.
be similar to something
Yeah.
like that? It may not be exact.
Makes
Okay,
sense.
but the point I'm getting at is these people then, who are in prison, when they come out, and remember I mentioned personal finance being taught as part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
That's extremely important.
Sure it is.
Little things about how do I manage my credit card? How do I manage
Well,
my
just
personal
teaching
debt?
them how to balance a checkbook or something like that.
Exactly.
For some people, you know.
And there's people that would learn how to, if they want to go into something and learn about investments, they go. There's people that teach them that.
It's very
skill.
important.
Okay, if the guy
Extremely
says,
important.
"Well, I've always wanted to be an accountant," believe it or not, well, then he learns how to do that. But the point is, who does he learn it from? Go back to Jesus, at the time of Jesus, that was all apprenticed. You became a carpenter because you worked for a carpenter. as an
Absolutely.
apprentice. There was none of this you go to the University of Jesus.
Yeah.
You learned on the job with
Sure.
all these jobs. If you wanted to be an artist, you learned from the artist
Sure.
as an apprentice.
That's exactly the way
And
it
they
was.
have the term journeyman and
Yeah.
apprentice and journeyman and so forth. But who are you learning from? You're learning from somebody that has walked the walk. You're not learning from somebody that talked the walk.
Well, I hope this gets implemented because I think it's ideal. I think it solves a lot of problems, and a lot of problems.
Right.
A lot more than just
Right.
one. It also adds to the economy when you think about it,
Ray,
and big time.
imagine the cost reduction something like that would
Oh
be.
my gosh.
Now you've turned a negative into an asset. You know, a tremendous liability. And it's a huge, costly liability. Imagine the difference when you change that to an asset.
Sure.
And that is what I consider a channel into the prison reform. And these prisons, we got them right here, you know, Avondale and Corcoran. And,
Yeah.
okay, you'd have one prison. There is no violent people in there.
Yeah, this you said you've separated 20%
But
of the
and
violence.
those whatever they're sitting around doing nothing, those become classrooms with the equipment necessary to learn that. And they follow the discipline of that prison. In other words, that you're not free to do this, that, or no different than you're in prison.
Yeah.
Right? So you have the discipline like that with the prison discipline necessary. But you also have this opportunity to learn a skill. So with this guy that came up to me that had been, I don't know how long he already been in prison, come and say, can I make it out on the outside? The question will be, hey, I'm going, boy, when I got out of here, I've got a skill and I'm going to make it on the outside.
He won't even have that question in his mind.
It won't be in his mind because he knows where he can go.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, he's probably, these things can produce things. I mean, they produce more than just license plates, you know. They and industry would buy from them just like they'd buy from,
Well, of course.
you know.
Yeah.
Now, when they buy that from them, where does that money go? It goes in to help support the prison, right? So what? Instead of money outflow, we have money coming in.
Sure.
It's a partnership with the
That's
prison.
what I was
and
saying
private
earlier.
enterprise.
It's a business and a profitable business.
Yeah, it's a profitable business, and you're improving people's lives. And in this case, let's say probably somewhere around 500,000 people right now,
You know,
or
if
500,000.
if something like that, and I could see it, could become self-efficient, that would be a major burden off the government.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
It'd be a positive.
Yeah, absolutely, all the way.
It'd be a positive. And now you'd have these people. There's some people that only can do this or only can do that. You know, we're not sitting there saying we're going to make geniuses out of this. We don't have to.
No.
Well, but what they are going to do is they will learn that particular skill no matter. I don't care if it's making beds in a motel room. That's a skill to learn.
Yeah.
And then you learn the personal things you learn about how do you handle your finances. What does it mean?
Like you said, that's very important.
Right. And so this is being done in the prison system in a partnership with the government, which ultimately ends up being a partnership with private enterprise, in that anyone needing employees requiring a certain skill level can pick up a skilled person. And, you know, when is Joe getting out of prison? Well, he's got about 9 more months left. Well, Joe, listen, I understand that you know how to do this, and this is what I want, and I want you to consider working for our company when you get out.
There you go.
I want you to consider being an employee. He said, well, I got probation, I got parole, and I got to go there. We'll work on that. I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried on you doing your job. And he comes out and he's got a job.
Before he gets out. See?
Because 90% of, well, I don't know if it's 90%, there is a percent, but a bunch of them that get out rotate right back. Just a
I had
revolving door.
heard 70%, which is high.
Yeah, well, of course it is. But think about that. It's a
Extremely high.
revolving door.
And this was 10 years ago, so it's probably up from that then. I'm
Well,
sure
I've talked to people that are out and then are in the revolving door.
Yeah.
And they do something right at the end to go back in because it's the system screwed up. I'll give you an example. The guy's got a wife, and he's got 7 kids. And he gets out of prison. Now he becomes the sole
Provider.
He says they're no at minimum wage, and that's all he can hope to get.
Yeah.
If he can even get because of his prison record. If he could only, he says, I can't support this family the way it is. I got to go back in prison so they qualify to get the freebies. And so what do? He does something that gets him right back in again. And he just.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, and I've seen it firsthand, so I know it exists.
Yeah.
Okay, now think of the difference now. If this guy learned a skill And I found that most of these people, now they're cons, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But part of the program is to get that con out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if he learns a particular skill, and because some of them that I've talked to are pretty darn smart people. What happens if he learns that skill? Like the guy that had a successful drug dealing business. Okay, what if he learns that skill now in this particular job that has a requirement, and he now learns that skill, and now he's making the kind of money that he could support this family. You talk about indirectly helping the government, they're off welfare now.
Sure.
This guy's a producing individual.
Big plus. I hadn't even thought about that angle.
Oh yeah, it's huge. And so he's back, and he's performing a utility, or he wouldn't be hired. So there's a benefit plus there. Plus now he's providing for his family, which they now become American contributors instead of American detractors.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my idea of the prison reform. And I think that was, why wouldn't that be just as easy as the way it is right now? It's horrible the way it is right now.
Oh, absolutely it is.
Totally expensive, totally non-productive, totally anti-productive, in fact.
Well, the sad part is this: you've got this potential just sitting there,
Right.
doing nothing.
And what you're doing is you're wasting a humanity of a life of someone that perhaps would like or could do or has a potential to do much better if only he was in the right way. And I can't think of a better way. I go to prison and I want to learn how to do this.
You're right, Gary. I can't. What a great asset to this country, this whole country, and overall, in so many different ways.
Well, Ray, I've been in a room with 50 prisoners, and every single one of them wanted to do something when they got out, and they wanted to do something productive, but they
didn't have the skills, didn't have the means to get the skills.
They didn't have the skills, but they had the record.
Yeah.
Now it's two things against you, right?
Sure.
No skills and a record. So they'd ask me, what do you do? I said, man, the only thing I could think of is get on a fishing boat in Alaska for about 90 days.
Yeah, you told me about that.
And save your money, then get out and buy some lawnmowers and mow lawns or something.
Yeah.
I mean, do something for yourself
Yeah.
because you're not going to get hired.
Yeah.
And I said, learn a skill. And part of the skill you have to learn is how do you handle finances? Well, that's taught in that prison. But you've been separated from the violent criminals and all the violence, the criminality that goes on in a prison, because the prisons aren't run by the prison guards. They're run by the inmates.
Sure.
But now you're separated from the bad influencing inmate, and now you're over here with the pro-influencing instructors and other inmates just like you who are anxious to learn and be productive because you are performing something while you're in there, and because you may even be contracted. I mean, you may contract with the prison saying, hey, I need this many boxes every month.
Yeah.
So you make a contract, and they produce those boxes for you. But they learn the skills of operating the machinery, and learn the skills of also management. You may have classes that learn how to manage.
Yeah.
And so I just wouldn't change anything other than the way the military teaches it.
Your whole concept is great. I mean, they're being, like you said, they're being taught by people that know,
right? As
opposed to going through the educational system.
Yeah, and you work that with the private enterprise. You go over there and you say, Ray's over there on that machine making tires. It says we want him to, for a semester, about 3 months, we want him to teach out at the prison. And he said, man, I can't afford to have that guy go over there. Yeah, you can, because here's what you're being subsidized for him going over there. And then Ray goes over there because what has he done? He's teaching a skill, and maybe there's some kind of a bonus or something.
I would think there'd probably be something.
I would think so,
Yeah.
So then you go over there and say, hey, I'm spending 3 months with the prison, and I'm going to be teaching these 20 guys how to do this and how to do that, whatever it is you got. So then you're over there, and that's a partner with a private employer and the government is assisting, and at a far less cost than it is housing. Because that 500,
absolutely,
that 500,000 now becomes something like maybe 100,000. It reduces.
Yeah.
Because people are aware of that,
That would just be an ongoing thing. I mean, it's got to be.
Yeah, because there's so many things that get you in prison besides.
It's gonna. It's you think about this. It's gonna lessen prison population.
Well, I talked to a guy the other day that he's on parole right now, and
How old a guy is he, Gary?
oh, he's in his 20s. He's got a wife and 2 kids, and he spent time. He's
Drugs?
a felon.
Drugs?
Yeah, drugs. And he's a felon, and he's trying to get a job, and he's a nice guy. And anyway. He can't. He's got 2 kids. Says I want to support these kids. And his wife. He says, and I'm trying to get a job, and I cannot get a job.
What a shame.
Well, he has no skills. He's a felon, and all he's got is I want to. And then he has to go to parole, and they don't work with you. In other words, he goes and get a job, and it's 2 in the afternoon. Well, you got to be here for your parole officer, and so then he has to take. They don't accommodate. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I know they don't.
And so, and you know that, and that works against you because all
Sure.
of a sudden you bust parole, you're back in, right?
Yeah.
Well, you're working on a roof, and you're a roofer, working on a roof up there, and all of a sudden it's 2:00, and you got to leave, and you got that hot tar and everything, and you got to leave because the parole is not flexible.
Jeez.
The probation officer, if you don't show up,
Yeah.
back in prison you go.
Yeah.
That's employer that's got you. What's he thinking?
Sure.
He says, "Man,
I can find somebody that I don't have
yeah,
to go through
I don't
this
have
with."
to go through this."
Hang on, Gary. We're going to take a little break here, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back and say 2 and 2.
God bless the USA. But I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you.
Okay, I'm back with Gary. It's something struck me that Gary had said earlier about the fact that it really doesn't have anything to do with guns. It has everything to do with morals and values in it. And when it comes down to it, it's very true. I've said over and over again, you can only do so much with gun control, and it doesn't matter anyway because the bad guys are going to get the guns. There's probably more value in gun trading in this country than there is in drugs, when you think about it, over the long run.
Well,
or at least as much.
And the greatest crime right now, if you go look at the statistics, we'll pick on Chicago, is it has the strictest gun laws in the nation and has the most violent crime.
Let me. Oh, you hit on something that I know about. Let's take Chicago, okay? Let's take New York, which has 9 million people. Let's take Los Angeles, which has 6. That's 14, 15 million people right there. Let's take Chicago, which has about 2.5 million people. They have more murders than both of those the 2 largest cities in this country combined. What does that tell you? And as Gary said, they have the strictest gun control.
Yeah.
It does not work.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't work.
But speaking of prison, we've got something interesting coming right quick down the pike. Some of the top people in the FBI, in the CIA, and in the DOJ are going to be facing prison very shortly. I wonder if they'd be interested in learning a new vocation.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, like it happens every time that Gary comes, that was good. Time has flown by. We're at the end. I'm going to tell you what I tell you every single week, okay? When you see a law enforcement officer, go up and shake his hand and tell him how much we appreciate him. Gary does it. I've got people at the gym at GB3 that tell me that they're starting to do it, and they appreciate it so much that there's somebody on their side that does what we don't want to do. And they are wonderful men and women who protect us. So let's go up, let's shake their hands, let's tell them we appreciate what they do. On the final note, before you retire tonight, let's send some prayers and love and hope to Santa Fe, Texas, and start some type of healing process for those wonderful people that lost everything, absolutely everything. So go ahead, Gary.
Well, I was going to say, Ray, you bring up that every show at the end you bring up about the officers. That is a tremendous service.
Thank you.
That you're performing there,
Thank
or
you
you're
so
doing
much.
there, and it's not only appreciated by the officer, which of course it is, immensely so, but it's appreciated by people. It gives them a second thought to hesitate and say, why am I this safe as it is right now? If it
Good
wasn't,
point, Gary.
if it wasn't for those people, and you constantly bring that reminder, and I think it's great.
Hey, you want to make a cop smile? Go up and tell him how much you appreciate him. I guarantee you will see a smile on his face, and they deserve to smile probably more than any of us.
Yeah, got it.
So until we meet again next week, joyously next week, heaven's blessings.
Defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the
CentralValleyTalk.com